The answer to your question is that it's a very multi-dimensional problem which cannot be answered by focusing on a single dimension of Indian proxies or their penetration. Of course, they have penetrated, and there's no hidden fact that India and a number of other countries also, perhaps, which do not see the stability in Balochistan serving their national interests. They made a common cause, but primarily it is India, and it is using the Afghan proxies, Afghan spaces, and the Baloch dissidents to resort to acts of terror. Active ecosystem of support has been established, and this is not something new. It's a very long history of this support. In the past, also, BLA militants have been trained by RAW, and the state of Pakistan has been confronting those efforts. What has happened now is that these efforts have gained an added virulence because of an urgency on part of India, perhaps, or an impatience to up the ante in Balochistan to divert attention from what is happening inside India. So, a beleaguered Indian premier, which tasted defeat last year in Operation, what they call Operation Sindoor, and now they are politically being cornered because BJP has not delivered on the governance front, and there is a restive youth cohort which is very active and which is up against those injustices. So, seeing those prospects dimming, I think the desperation is evident and they want to externalize. And I won't be surprised if their desperation manifests itself in another adventure like Operation Sindoor, but that's a different topic altogether. What they are doing now is also a continuation of the Operation Sindoor because they are, in a way, indirectly engaging Pakistan into this counter terror campaign so as to keep the pot boiling in Balochistan. And also, they are making a common cause with the TTP militants and terrorist ecosystem that prevails in Afghanistan, unfortunately, because Afghanistan, as you know, has become a dysfunctional state, which is a veritable hatchery of terrorism. The government is not in effective control and is actively, in many ways, abetting those acts of terror. So that's the big ecosystem in which these militants are operating. Of course, there are other very important factors that add to this thing, and those are political also in nature. Those are in the realm of grievances also, socio-economic grievances, development-related issues, and a host of other factors. But of course, the short answer to your question is that those proxies are being used very, very effectively because of the added logistics and a lot of support that is being provided from across the border. You see, Pakistan, in fact, is being confronted with a insurgency-like situation, acts of terror, which are now gaining the hue of an insurgency in some areas. Balochistan, KP, both included. In Balochistan, this is the sixth insurgency. And the first one was in 48, then 58, 60, 73, 2004, and now. So each time there was a different set of political and social and economic grievances. But each time those were very effectively tackled through a combination of kinetic and non-kinetic means. This time around also, the nature of grievances has some similarity with the same narrative rooted in the past. And What has given them a large supply of recruits and the disaffection of the people, which has fed into their narrative, is perhaps a governance part that needed a lot of attention, unequal development, and there are parts of Balochistan where the people feel disenfranchised and disempowered politically. Well, those could be the perceptions because the political process is on. There is a provincial assembly, there's a provincial cabinet, but practically speaking, it's the core and periphery issue as well because, as you know, uh, provinces like Balochistan and especially those militancy hit areas, those have always constituted as peripheries where the governance and the development aspects have always been questionable at best. So this is one part. There are many questions on the kind of public representatives and how best they can connect with their electorate. Perhaps they are not assuaging those grievances very well, and they might have their own grievances against the state structure. So those aspects have to be looked at by the state. Development is one part. Balochistan has a very vast and difficult geography, and it has a very sparse population. So its political representation is very less. So this asymmetry in political representation also feeds into that grievance narrative. They say that we have very few representatives, and those representatives and their voice is not very strong compared to the other provinces. So this grievance needs to be assuaged through some kind of political engagement or political reforms. And then the rubber hits the ground is the local governance. There is no effective local governance in Balochistan at this point of time, and the provincial government, despite its very best efforts, it is now using uh, you know aspects like development to assuage those grievances, and the development funds, which were earlier reputed to be filched by the extractive elite, now those are being spent through a very transparent mechanism through district administration and other law enforcement agencies. But that, to me, would not resolve the problem unless the public representatives, they take the ownership and the people accept those public representatives as their genuine representatives. What is happening is that the fruits of development, like the development funds and the jobs, even which is the right of the people, those probably are not being, there is a perception that those are not being given on merit. And the public representatives, which have to be the go-betweens between the state and the people, those have to be empowered, and those have to be the genuine stakeholders. Only the state, if it has to sponsor a political elite, it should point its support finger on someone who is capable, who has roots in the people. So I think unless we develop the stakes of people in this system, there is an example of mines and minerals now through a mechanism. The distribution of the proceeds is shared between the federal government and the provincial government. Provincial government retains a stake, but there is still a lot of scope where the provincial government should share uh, a sizable chunk of those proceeds with the local people, and the local people should have a local governance mechanism or some through some other mechanism. They should have a say on how those proceeds from those mines and minerals and other projects are spent on actually the development needs of the people. And unless people see the fruits of CPEC percolating down to the people in terms of better livelihood opportunities, a better infrastructure development, they will not. They will always consider themselves alienated from this whole development process. So that connectivity, that mental connectivity needs to be fostered. For far too long, our young cohort, especially, has either wallowed in self-pity or dabbled in anti-state narratives. There's a time we bring them uh, to connect better with the state by way of development, connectivity, and participatory governance. Unless that is done and the people are really made the stakeholders, this militancy would find fertile grounds and external forces would keep on dabbling in these troubled waters. I think establishment is not averse to this idea and it's very favorably predisposed to having the genuine representative government which has stakes, which has roots in the people, and people have stakes in the system. How this is done is the pearl of high price to chase. Whether it can be done by way of some political reform, by way of some administrative reform, by way of better devolution. As I said, we have just created a structure after 18th Amendment where the powers and including political and financial have been appropriated by the provinces, but those have not been devolved to the district level and local government level. Unless those powers are devolved and people themselves become uh, active participants in these local governance structures, the fruits of governance would not be visible to them. So no amount of political engagement would convince those people unless those local people at local government are really empowered. And yes, the genuine representatives, any electoral process should throw up, and especially in a province like Balochistan, which is beset by so many competing narratives and which is in the crosshair of external meddling. Uh, there's a greater need for transparency and genuineness of the electoral process, which throws up the real representatives, which could be answerable to the people. And then those representatives should also be given the powers, like I said, at the local government level, to actually engage with the needs of the people and be answerable to people. Of course, that's a given because all movements that are rights based and those uh, uh, movements or people or the leadership which agrees to play by the rules, remain within the constitutional scheme, and are agitating for their rights, those should be encouraged. And that is the essence of democracy. Haq do Tariq, yes. Maulana Hidayatur Rahman, I'm sure he's now part of the system. He is in the provincial assembly. He keeps hearing his grievances, and there's a forum for his grievances to be heard. Uh, one could differ with the way he argues, but one cannot differ with the uh, genuine demands for the rights of his people. So I think state can do a business with him. State can do business with all those entities which wish to stay within the constitutional scheme. And if all these forces which are on the peripheries and the fringes, these are mainstreamed through a political process, I'm sure many of those grievances would be genuinely assuaged. And once they are in the system, they will become stakeholders and see for themselves what are the limitations of the state. And also uh, they would be satisfied that their demands at least are being heard. So I agree with you entirely that these political rights-based movements all should be accommodated. Care should be taken, however, to see there are certain people who appropriate the leadership role who are on the payroll of external agencies. So we should be very careful about those characters also as to whose game they are playing, and those could be easily identified. I'm sure the state has the means and capability to identify. So those incorrigible or uh, irreconcilable elements, those need to be treated differently. And if anyone amongst them takes recourse to violence or violation of the law of the land, those should be treated as per the law. But yes, all others who are estranged need to be dealt a healing hand and need to be treated with care and circumspection. And all this political space should be ceded to such elements by the state. See, failing is a very strong word. I won't say those are failing. What is happening is that this implacable wave of militancy is more visible. And this visibility is a consequence of the desperation amongst the militants as well as their handlers to create the headlines and create impact, because perhaps they are viewing this window of opportunity when Pakistan is trying its best, or Pakistan also has a window of opportunity to break the shackles of its underdevelopment and reap the fruits of its diplomatic heft and traction at the international level. Uh, this desperation is also a consequence, like I mentioned, in response to another answer of the domestic situation of our neighboring country, where a beleaguered government wishes to externalize its own issues here. And the Doval policy of bleeding Pakistan through 1,000 cuts. So that is a very important reason that we should remember why these waves of terror acts are gaining strength. But I would definitely say that there is a need now to squeeze the spaces, and a multi-dimensional strategy is required. There's a need for political engagement and assuaging of the political concerns. There's a need of giving the sense of ownership so that people actually own this political process. They become real, genuine political stakeholders. So, no amount of development would resolve their dilemma till the time they don't feel themselves part of the system. So, their sense of estrangement first has to go. Secondly, development itself creates conditions, and development does not only mean infrastructure, development also means livelihoods. Now we have the example of these fragmented insurgency where there's a coastal belt insurgency, there is a Jhalavan, Saravan insurgency, and there's a Pakhtun belt militancy and terrorism. So all these terrorism uh, acts are fragmented. In coastal belt, it is led by the middle class, which is educated, which is not under a Sardari system. And in the middle, it is being led by the middle class, which is now also, it has made a common cause with the estranged Sardars and their thinking. And in Pakhtun belt, the militancy and terrorism from Afghanistan in the shape of TTP has started percolating. So three have to be treated very differently. But what is common amongst them is the need for resolving the basic dilemma as to create conditions under which this the basic causes do not survive. We know that Bashir Zaib of Majid Brigade, he is leading insurgency. He was not a Sardar, he's just a commoner. And there was another person like him, Sana Sangat, who died fighting the security forces. He was just like him, but while he was, before he died, he shared his concerns, and he openly said that had I got the livelihood or a better opportunity at life, I won't have taken this path. So this is human nature, and if you provide livelihood, if you provide an opportunity to get politically and job-wise mainstreamed, I don't think so. There will be very many willing recruits to the cause of militancy, even if the Indians pour the money. So we basically have to nurse our own wounds, and we have to assuage these concerns, placate the sensibilities, create more conditions by way of jobs, livelihoods, make people stakeholders, and then go for kinetic operations to irreconcilable elements and the elements who are being handled by external forces and which have crossed the Rubicon and who have no other recourse but violence, and they don't want to make any political compromise with the government. And those are identifiable easily, and through intelligence-based operations, focused rapier-like precise surgical operations should be conducted, and they should be taken out and made to feel the heat of state response. And state is quite capable, mind you, of that. It will only start winning if it has won the people's hearts, and it has separated reconcilables from irreconcilable. So this is very essential to understand the nature of the militancy and its fragmented nature. So in Pashtun belt, it needs to be treated differently. Pashtuns are more integrated, they're more entrepreneur, so they have to be given a set of incentives, more mainstream, and the cross-border movement of TTP has to be stopped. And in central Balochistan, a set of incentives, political engagement, plus uh, greater livelihood opportunities. That is the way to go. So, as far as the kinetic operations are concerned, yes, there is one big difference from the previous insurgencies, that those were not led by such sophisticated arms as these militants possess. The militants that used to have only AK-47 as the most sophisticated weapon now have M4 and sniper, night vision capability, and other sophisticated equipment, which is also a consequence of what was left in Afghanistan by the Americans. But this is the ecosystem, the whole landscape in which we have to operate. The kinetic operations are being conducted. The large number of operations have been conducted, and there are multiple cycles. But I would like to see a more focused, precise, and more segmented approach wherein only these elements are targeted, which are trying to coerce people also, because once the people start seeing the state winning, they also join the state. So presently, there's a fear factor also. So these elements, they come down from the mountains, they seek refuge, they coerce people, and that environment needs to be snatched back, and the improvement, of course, can be affected here. As I said, the space is there as long as the basic causes are there. Unless the people feel that they have a stake in the federation, not with the detractors or the external handlers, they will never go by the way of insurgency, because who puts their life in risk for money? If the same opportunities are provided by state, they will not go that way. But the space is there, and once we put our own things in order, then the external factor can be easily taken care of, because those who are doing this thing with them, they also have their vulnerabilities, and then we can go and tell them that, look, uh, please don't do this, and if you do that, there are consequences. But before we do that, I think we need to address these issues here, and I'm sure with this comprehensive approach, the issue can be resolved. You see, there are many limitations of diplomacy also, because diplomacy is also captive to geopolitics. No amount of diplomacy that we do would alter the fact that India has certain relevance, and there is a certain way in which those geopolitical forces, which are inimical to the interests of Pakistan and stability in Balochistan, which view CPEC differently, which view China's collaborations with Pakistan differently, their attitude will not change. And even if we go to all the capitals of the world and highlight these aspects, I'm sure that would create an impact. But we should not rely on that. We should rely on our own sinews, our own ability to resolve these politico economic issues, and leave no space, leave no chink in our armor to be exploited by the external forces. Yes, we have to make common cause with the regional countries like China, Central Asian states, Iran, Russia, and impress upon them the need for regional peace, which is in the interest of peace and development in the whole region. Because Pakistan definitely is a very important geographic connector with the Central Asia and say, South Asia. So, if there's peace in Afghanistan and Pakistan, the whole region would develop and improve. And this is in the interest of the regional countries. So, this kind of diplomacy, I think we need to focus more upon.